when we're looking at analysing calls, when we're looking at analysing speech and content and various other things, deriving meaning from speech is a onerously complex task. And a lot of the platforms out there will certainly look at it and say, okay, here are things that you can count. But what they don't do, or what, by breaking these down to simple things, as I say, speech is complex. There's a lot of stages to a conversation. The ebb and flow of what I would call sentiment transition, which is a call starts out well in good morning, how are you doing? Yeah, thank you very much, etc., etc. Can I help you? Yes, you certainly can. I need X or Y. And if you can't provide X or Y, so, well, why can't you provide X or Y? Well, it's not in our process. You need to go online and do something else. The conversation starts to go downhill. But more importantly, from a agent perspective and also from a customer's perspective, it's how you say what you say rather than what you're actually saying is important. And key point, in fact, if you look at two key people, so William Shakespeare, which I guess we all know, famous bard, famous for how speech is communicated, what sort of emphasis you can place on that, but also for people like famous actors. In here we cited Noel Coward, so he played, I think it was Mr. Bridger in The Italian Job, but his command of language, where emphases are put, hugely important, because that changes the meaning of what you're saying. Just how you say it, not what you're saying, but how you say it changes that meaning. For William Shakespeare, massively important. This goes back hundreds of years to the use of things like iambic pentameter and things like soliloquies. Again, massively important, because the rhythm with which you say something, how you say something, and I'm not going to start quoting Shakespeare and go to be or not to be, is it to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, etc. I'm not good at that stuff. But the point is that these things change meaning. And it's not just at the level of Shakespeare or the level of Noel Coward, it's everyday speech. And more importantly, if we're analysing everyday speech, things like simple word count, or was it said loud, or was it said quiet, absolutely is not enough. It really isn't. And here's an example. And this is nothing to do with my aunt. This is agent training that you can do. So from an agent training example, and what we're saying here is how you say something. The same word said 5 different ways carries a completely different meaning. And it's super important to understand that happens, where you place emphasis, where you place spaces, where you go silent, and how that silence occurs, what that silence occurs after. Or there are various other ways in terms of how you say things. So, I didn't kill my aunt, or I didn't kill my aunt. All these things, 5 different reasons for 5 different outcomes from exactly the same words. Now, if you put that into an AI platform, yes, it will record the words, but will it get the meaning? Can it get the meaning? And in some cases, absolutely yes, where you've got more advanced algorithms that really can read that tone, that spacing, that emphasis, hugely important. But if you're doing manual call listening and you've got to do a lot of it, then no, clearly not necessarily there, but super important. So I didn't kill my aunt, and nobody else did either. But the point is that if we look at this as a precursor to where we're going and the types of challenges we're facing, because we're looking at across multiple channels, we're looking across many thousands of clients, many thousands of interactions, many thousands of reasons. The way that I would say early speech analytics, or the first wave of analytics solutions has been created, are very much Gen 1 or Gen 2 type platforms. A lot of these are touted as AI, but they're absolutely not, because they take a huge amount of manual input. They take a lot of upfront building. And if you want to train and tune and various other things, that can be a huge expense. But from an operational perspective, these can be very, very complex things to do. It can be one size fits all, or they try to do a one size fits all approach. but really the intelligence of that platform is absolutely imperative.
Finally, the communication bit, which I'm personally quite excited about, because it is a very, very subtle, and it can be very subtle. The way we talk to each other, it's always, you know, or sometimes it's also difficult to if you imagine being an agent, and if people on, you know, are calling you in advance having an issue and not being very happy, you know, how do you handle that? So obviously a lot of training needs to happen, and even though it looks like something very, very obvious, it isn't always. So what we do in Sentient Machines platform, we monitor the dynamics between the sentiment of the customer and the sentiment of the agent, and then we look into the change, and is something that the agent is doing, is that somehow helping the customer, or is it not helping? And well, I'm gonna show you an example that I think is very interesting, where so we have bad, we call it bad to bad, and we have been asked many times if we have a bad to worse category, but we still keep it name of bad to bad because we think that's bad enough. So, but technically that means the customer was not happy at the beginning and it's just gotten worse. Now, is there anything the agent could do to help that? And I'm gonna play now a video where we're gonna pick the calls that end with a negative or with like frustration, but also where an agent is actually using empathy. So, because usually you would say, well, actually, all you need to do is just be, you know, empathetic. So that's it. Like that's a solution to your problem. But let's just see an example. I think it's more interesting than me talking about it. So I'm just selecting here some account management conversations, bad to bad. So this is the change I mentioned, and empathy. So this means there will be empathy from the agent side in this particular conversation or in these three conversations.
Good afternoon, Hallwood Finance, Phil speaking.
Hi there. I've just waited for 15 minutes on your phone line, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, we are experiencing quite a high number of calls at the moment, so that is why you've had the long wait time.
Like 15 minutes is a very long time.
That's quite average.
What, you're saying 15 minutes is an average call waiting time for your company?
For most companies, about 15 minutes is
I don't care. You shouldn't have to wait 15 minutes to talk to somebody anyway. Moving on.
So, so we're going to go back to this one particular sentence that I think is very interesting, where he says,
sorry, we are experiencing quite a high number of calls at the moment.
You think that's empathy, and it kind of is. Like if you.
So that is why you've had the long wait time.
But then the pitch goes in kind of the opposite direction. So the agent becomes irritated. Like it's kind of so he's kind of using the right script to begin with, and the right even tone. You could say it's like stable, but then it kind of goes downwards. And this is, I think, what the reason I like this example is because you can't really, like I always say that, you know, AI is not black and white. It's not about is there empathy in this call. It is about what happens after the empathy, what happens before, what happens like at the whole end of the conversation, what is the outcome. And to really understand that, you have to go deep into the analysis of human communication and then combine that with your algorithms. So and I didn't talk a lot again for the interest of time. You could have seen the annotations like apathy and irritation. So these are the things that you want to avoid your agents using. So you don't even want this to be picked up in their tone of voice, because that should not ever happen, because otherwise we know what's gonna which category they will be assigned to. So process of this particular, well, using sentient machines for identifying, I would say, strengths and weaknesses of your agents, are that you could really make it bespoke. You could really target and make it a very effective training process, and really have a very, very good overview and improve even efficiency of your QA process. So as opposed to just like typical, you know, manually done QA reports. On the negative side, again, you have to give insights to these people. So someone needs to take on board, you know, what needs to be done, and then improve this. And this is where, like I always talk about, combination of AI and human, and this is where I believe the humans need to kind of, with the insight from AI, help other humans.